thanks for joining me today. My name is Jo and I'm an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator based in the UK. Today I'm going to show you how I've made this card. So the card that we're making today is using this new stamp called Whiskey Business, which is in the new annual catalogue from Stampin' Up for 2020-2021. And I quite like this because it was my dad's favourite tipple, and I'm a bit partial to a whiskey myself. So I thought this would be quite a nice little card to do. So that's the stamp set, as I say, we're going to be using. Here is the actual stamp set itself. So what we're going to need to do first of all is cut some card. So what I've done is I've actually cut myself a base in early Espresso. So this is a full A4 sheet, which is 29.75 centimetres, and I've cut it at 10.5 centimetres and scored at 14.85. So that just gives us our standard card base, and I'm going to be using it in landscape format today. I've then got a layer of our new in colour Bumblebee, and this measures 14.35 centimetres by 10. And then a layer of Whisper White, which measures 13.85 centimetres by 9.5. Now I've duplicated that because I'm going to use these pieces actually in the middle of my card. So first of all, what we need to do is just to take our white pieces, just put the others to one side for a moment, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat emboss so that I can get my sponging over the top of it so that it stands out quite well. So for that I'm going to be using a Versamark ink pad and also the glass with the ice, and I'm also going to be using white embossing powder for this. So first thing I want to do is to ink my stamp, and I'm just going to stamp it off the edge. And I'm going to get 3 of these going down. Now this is going to be my front panel. Oops. So I want my glasses on the left. Now for my inside panel, I want them on the right. But first of all, I'm just going to add some embossing powder to what I've just done. You can just see that. I'll heat that up in a moment. And I'm going to do the same again, but on the right hand side with this sheet. As I say, this is going to go on my inside. Okay. I'm just going to add my embossing powder. Okay, so I'm just going to heat those up now. Okay, so I don't know if you can just see those. This is my inside, so this is on the right hand side, and that's going to be sponged in a moment, and this is the front cover, which is on the left hand side. So it's just to give you a bit of a sort of idea of what I've done there. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sponge over the top of that. So I want to give it a little bit of colourant so that the actual glasses themselves will stand out from the page. So I'm going to be using 2 colours. I'm going to be using our new in colour, which is Cinnamon Cider, which is a lovely sort of rich browny sort of colour. And then I'm also going to be adding a little bit of Mango Medley, because whiskies traditionally has a bit of a golden sort of colour to it, so that's going to add to that. So I'm going to take a couple of sponges, just open these up. And I'm going to start with the cinnamon cider first. Now, when you're sponging, I'm using a glass mat so I can clear this up afterwards. But I strongly recommend that you do it on a shiny surface because it does make it so much easier to move the ink around. You can do it on a coarse scrap paper, but a shiny surface works marvellous. So I'm just going to start sponging off my page, and then I'm going to gradually just bring that colour in to my page here. You can also pick up any excess ink that falls. So I want this colour to be quite dark at this stage because I want it to really show up where I've embossed the glasses. So I'm not putting too much pressure on this sponge, just enough just to sort of lay down colour nicely, but you don't want to press too hard because then you start getting sort of nasty little marks in it. Okay, so that's obviously that side. Now I obviously had something under my page because it's created a little bump there. Can you see that? That will hopefully disappear in a moment. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a bit of the Mango Melody. And I'm going to go all over the top, but this time I want to stretch it just beyond where we sponged the cinnamon cider. So can you see it starts to give that sort of golden tone to it really. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that. I'm going to leave that one as it is. I'm going to put that to one side, and I'm now going to work on the other one. Now this is the one that's going on the front. So again, I'm starting with cinnamon cider. Just going to bring that colour in. Just work it up gently. It's better to go in gently because you can always add more. It's obviously very difficult to take it away if you've put too much down. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that. So now I'm going to go in with my Mango Melody. And again, just add that lovely golden tone to the edge. Okay, I'm quite happy with that. So that's going to be on our front. So if I just get these out of the way. And now what I do need to do very quickly is just to clear up that ink. There we go. So that is going to go on the front of my card. So if I bring my card bases in, so this is going to sit on here like this. But first of all, I need to do is to actually make my decanter and my little glass that's going to sit there with it, and also do some other decorations. So again, I'll put that to one side. Just bringing in a piece of Whisper White, and I'm going to stamp up my decanter using black memento, and also I need a glass. So I'm going to do those quickly. They've got really detailed images on them, so they're really, you know, really nice. They do a lot of the work for you, which is lovely. Okay, I think I'll just move that around that way. There we go. So that's my decanter and my glass stamped. So now what I need to do is to colour them in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Stampin' Blends to do this, and I'm using a combination of colours. I'm using the dark and light cinnamon cider, so that's obviously our new colours. I have got Mango Melody, and for this one I'm using the dark version. I didn't feel like I needed the light on this one. And then just to add to a slight tinge to my glasses, I'm actually using a light balmy blue and my colour lifter, and I'll show you how I've brought those together in a moment. So first of all, I'm going to put those to one side. I'm going to start off with my dark cinnamon cider, and I'm going to start on my glass. Now, obviously my ice cubes do not need colour in, but I'm just going to add some dark cinnamon cider to where the liquid would be. So I'm not worried if I'm going over that ice cube, because obviously that's inside the glass. And you can see where we have these little sort of cross sections on our actual images, that's where naturally your shadow would be. So if you can use those as a guide, you can kind of sort of work out where your darker areas will be. Now, I'm not going too dark because I'm also going in with the lighter one, but just add in a little touch just where those little hash lines are. Okay, so now I've done that, I'm actually going to use my light cinnamon cider, and I'm going to just sort of round those edges that I've just coloured, just bring in some of that colour from the edges. I'm leaving some little gaps because I'm going to add in some of the mango in a second. And it's just a case of building up your colours, really. So I'm using the little circular motions. If you've watched any of my other colouring videos, you'll see that I just use circular motions just to blend the colours nicely together. Okay, I'm not really too much at this stage because, as I say, I'm going to come in with my mango now, so I don't want to do too much blending. And I'm probably going to use the brush end of this to start with, I'm going to go over, literally over everything. And can you see it starts changing the colour? So in effect, what it does, it is kind of removing some of the actual cinnamon colour, and it's replacing it with the lovely golden mango. And I'm just working that until all my colours have sort of blended together and I'm quite happy with the actual colour tone. And I feel that I'm quite happy with that now, so I'm going to stop and let it dry, then I'll have another quick look at it just to see whether I'm still happy with it. So I'm going to do the same on the decanter. I'm just going to cut that off the end so that that can be drying separately. So exactly the same, I'm going to start with my dark cinnamon cider. What I don't want to do is to go along this line in the middle here, because this is where it's like the edge of the decanter, and cut glass is very thick, so you wouldn't actually, it would look almost transparent at that point. So I'm not going to add any down that middle section. So again, you haven't got so many hash marks to guide you on this one, but generally you could see that a shadow would create sort of around the edges. So if you just follow that sort of line, and obviously this is thick glass at the bottom here, so I'm just going to go up to here. I'm also going to add some just in here, because this is obviously this creates a shadow in this section as well, so that's going to be slightly darker. So I think I'm quite happy with the dark. If you notice, I did go over very slightly on that edge bit there, so I'm just going to use my colour lifter just to hopefully push it away a little bit. So I'm going in now with the light cinnamon cider, and as I said, these circular motions just to blend the colours together, start bringing them together. And do the same this side. Okay, and then I'm going to go in with my dark mango again using that brush end. It just makes it lays ink quicker, and it means that it will move quicker, so it will blend in with these lovely cinnamon tones. I'm going to move over to this side. Sometimes when you're using blends, it's best to let them dry a little bit sometimes, move on to another area and then go back. So as you can see, they've now all blended nicely together. I'm just going to bring my glass back in. I just want to lift this a little bit. It has gone a little bit darker than I would have liked. So I'm just going to take my colour lifter. Now what this does, it acts almost like a bleaching. So it's going to pull out some of that colour. As you can see, that's lightened that quite considerably. Now I'm going to let that dry because I might have to go back in and add some more mango in a second, but I will just let that dry. I'm quite happy with the way that has turned out, so I'll leave that to one side. And now what I want to do is, sometimes the glass can look a bit stark because the glass is obviously clear, but you still do get shadows on glass, and glass generally has a sort of bluey or a greeny sort of tone to it. So to deal with that, I'm bringing in Balmy Blue, and this is light Balmy Blue. And just where these little hashes are, I'm just laying down the lightest amount of colour. I don't want a lot at all. And as I say, it's just sort of where these little hash lines are. Slightest little bit of colour to the shoulders, and again to sort of here. And here. It's really, really delicate light colouring, but it's amazing what difference it does make when it's sort of done. And I'm going to do the same on here, so a little bit here, and a little bit on my ice cube as well. And then I'm going to take the brush end of my just make sure that's clean, which it wasn't. That's from using from the glass earlier. So this is my colour lifter again, and I'm just going to blend that light blue very, very lightly. And it will just create some little shadows. We're going to actually glaze this in a second, so okay. So I'm quite happy that, you know, that's where I want it to be. I'm just going to play a little bit more with these ice cubes just to lighten them very slightly. Get that little shadow on them. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that. So now what I'm going to do is just to cut these out. So as I said, I want to glaze these. So I'm going to actually use embossing powder to glaze mine. So you could use something like Winker Stella would add a sort of a shimmer to it, or you could use our glossy, what they're called, I can't think of that. They're called the shimmery crystal effects. You could use something like that on them if you wanted to, but obviously that does give a little bit of a sparkle. So I'm opting for just an embossing effect on mine. So as I said, just cut the glass out. Just going to now cut the decanter out. I'm leaving a very small white border. I don't want too much, but it is quite important I cut it at this stage. Okay, so that's my bottle and my glass now cut. So what I want to do is I want to emboss these using clear embossing powder this time, because I want it to just be shiny. So if I did it in white, obviously it would make the whole thing white. So I'm going to take my glass and I'm going to pop it face down into my Versamark ink pad. Please excuse the colour of my ink pad. I have a new one on order. So I'm going to pop that into my clear embossing powder. Now, obviously I need to hold this because this is going to get extremely hot. So I'm just going to heat it up. Okay, I'm going to add another layer on that in a moment, but I'll quickly just do the decanter as well. Oops. Forget to pop it in the powder. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to add a second layer to it. So I always let it cool down just slightly in between layers, because otherwise it can get, you know, quite patchy. So I always let it just dry a little bit, pop it back in the powder. And sometimes I might do 2 or 3 layers. It just depends on how it looks. But you'll be able to see, because as I say, the mottledness will go and it becomes more liquid, which that is nearly there, I would say. I'm going to pop it in while it's still wet. You can get away with that sometimes. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that. That's quite liquid now. I'm just going to let that dry. Can you see the difference? So it's quite glassy where this is quite mottled. So I'm going to pop that back onto my ink pad. Pop it back into my powder. Pop it straight back into my powder just to pick up a little bit more of the embossing powder. It's alive. Go. Heat it again. You can see it's automatically becoming more liquid. Okay, so I'm just going to let them cool down thoroughly, because it's a bit like hot jam at the moment, so it's quite sort of molten, so you just want to leave that just to dry thoroughly. So I should put them to one side. Okay, so now I'm going to bring back in my actual card front. So what I want to do, I'm going to be using 2 of our new products. So this is the Faux Suede trim, which is early Espresso, and it's really, really soft. It's really does feel like suede, but it's great for sort of men's cards because it's that rich sort of dark brown. And then I'm also going to be using the antiqued corners and slides elements. Now these are really lovely and they go with the World of Good suite. And there's little photo corners, as you can see there, but there's also these lovely little buckles, which is what I'm going to be using today. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to stick a piece of double-sided tape across my bottom section of my card. I'm using red tape. You can use whatever tape you have to hand. So I just want to stick it across about 2 or 3 centimetres up from the bottom. And I've just made it a little bit longer so I can tuck that around the back like that, so that when I stick my ribbon on, I can actually pop it around the back to hold it in place. I'm going to take that off. I'm going to start with my ribbon on the back. And I'm just going to make sure I try and get it as straight as I can, which that isn't. As I say, it will gently pull off, so don't worry too much. Okay, obviously it wasn't very straight when I put my tape on, but you can easily disguise that in a moment, so we won't worry about that. So I'm just going to cut that piece off and tuck that around the back. Okay, so where I have, can you see my tape is just sticking out there? I'm literally just going to run my scissors along that edge and it will just tuck it underneath. So that's okay. Right, so now that's done, I want to create like a belt has been done up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to thread some of this suede trim through my buckle, as if it, as I say, it was like a belt buckle. Okay, and I'm going to add it like a second layer onto here, and then at the end I'm going to trim this off at an angle. So as I say, this is like a second layer I'm putting on top. So again, I'm using tape and I'm going about 2/3 of the way across, I suppose, directly on top of my trim. And again, just popped it round the back there. I don't want to be making that end too thick, that is the only problem. So I'm going to peel that off. And I'm going to add this on top. And then I will actually glue my buckle down in a second. And I'm going to trim that off at the back. Okay, so this is like my second layer. I'm now going to cut that as an angle, as if it's like a buckle that you've just done up. And I'm going to pop a glue dot just underneath that buckle, just to hold it into place. Okay, so that's that part done. Now what I want to do is I want to mount this on 3D foam onto my actual Bumblebee layer. Now the reason I'm doing that is because obviously we have got 2 layers of this ribbon coming around here, so it's going to be quite high if I try to stick it flat onto the surface. So I'm just going to take some double-sided pads. These are our Stampin' Dimensionals. Don't leave home without them. Okay, I'm just going to put one more in the middle there just to give it its support in the centre part. Peel these off. You find these things everywhere, literally. Okay, so I'm going to then position this over my Bumblebee layer. It's very difficult when you're trying to record because you can't actually see properly where the top of your paper is. Okay, that doesn't look too bad. Okay, so that's on there, and now I'm going to just glue the Bumblebee layer flat onto my actual card. And I'm just going to be using normal multi-purpose glue for this. Okay, I'm just going to hold this one up, I'll be able to see better. And when you've been using embossing powder, it doesn't matter how well you clear up, you always get like little gritty bits. So I usually have a makeup brush to hand that I usually just give everything a quick brush over just to get rid of any little bits and pieces. Okay, so these are all now dried and they're cool, and they're they become sort of malleable almost, so you can almost sort of mold it into sort of a shape that you want it to be. Now I'm going to stick this onto here, but what I want to make sure is that I don't stick foam pads on the section that's going across the middle. So I'm just going to stick a couple at the bottom, and I'm going to stick a couple at the top, and then I'm just going to actually I can fit one just on that lid part, I think. There we go. So I'm just going to use those 5, and my ribbon will go through this empty section in the middle. Okay, so that's my decanter, and then I've got my glass, which I'm going to add a couple down the centre. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I want to position my glass that it's slightly over this. So I'm just going to move that one down very slightly because it's got that ribbon underneath it there as well. Peel it off and then add my glass. Okay, so that's my decanter and glass there, and now I just want to add my little greeting. The greeting that I really like from this set is the one that says, "Straight up, you're the best." I thought that was quite nice. So I'm actually going to emboss this again, but using the white embossing powder this time. Okay, can't see that, I know. As you can see, I've embossed that onto early Espresso cardstock. Quickly heat that through. Okay, and this time I'm just going to add the greeting actually on sort of fairly straight, but I'm going to have it coming in sort of from this edge here. So I'm just going to trim my piece, trying to make it as straight as I can. Okay. Just going to leave a little bit extra that end because I can always trim that again in a second. There we go. So this is going to come across here. And I think I just need to take a tiny bit more off that right hand edge. And this I think I'm going to just stick down flat because we've got quite a lot of sort of 3D elements here. So I'm just going to stick this down flat. Just button it up to that edge. Just make sure it's straight as can be. There we go. And then I've also got the inside, which I did earlier, so I'm just going to glue those together and pop those inside. So like I say, I can still feel the little gritty bits. And I think just to finish it off, I'm going to use a couple of these little in colour enamel dots just to add a little something. Sometimes you just need something to sort of fill the white space a little bit. So there we go. That's my card. So as I say, this is using Whiskey Business, which is available now. It's a lovely little set to work with. I've had fun sort of playing with it. You do all sorts of things with it. So yeah, I hope you like it. And thanks for dropping by, and I will see you soon. Bye.